How's it going, ladies and Bruce's up? I'm Sixkilla. Welcome back to Choices That Matter. And the sun went out. We are just finishing up the battle, with any luck, and launching the rocket and all of that. We're probably about to enter Arc 15. Here's Cray Cray. How exactly are we going to get rid of the tank? Mr. Wong finished the rocket I devised, teacher. I'm so glad it works. So we hope, Etienne scoffed, checking dials on the rocket launcher that I didn't even understand. As long as it doesn't blow us up, I'm happy, I muttered. I have to go. The shuttle's about to launch. I have to see Sharon off. Etienne stopped and stared at me, his fear evident. I tried my best to keep my expression neutral. Wait for me before firing the rocket, I said, trying to move the conversation away from where it was headed. Etienne sighed and nodded. Tell Sharon... Say good luck for me, alright? Of course, don't worry about it. Promise to wait for me though, okay? It's safer for her than anyone else. She's going in the rocket, away from all the murder. Etienne nodded and went back to cleaning. It wasn't quite the promise I wanted, but it would do. I descended back down the ladder and walked the short distance to the other side of the building. Teacher? Yes, Moti? Are you afraid of our friends dying in space? I'm more afraid that we won't find anything. All of this will have been for nothing. It is the last viable choice, teacher. To get answers, we have to delve into the unknown. The unknown's a pretty big place, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. That's why the answers hide there. It's harder for us to find them. Why hide it all then, if they want to be found? I grumbled. Moti's explanation was giving me a headache. To make it worth our time. I sighed and didn't reply. Before I could make it to the other side of the building, someone tugged at my arm. We have a problem, Vardik wheezed, clearly out of breath. Seriously, I groaned. Can't we just catch a break? Seems not, comrade. He shook his head and took a deep breath. I noticed there was a blood stain on the side of his shirt, and I didn't say anything else. Regaining some composure, he straightened again. I was trying to be sneaky, maybe lay a few more traps, he explained, so I crept out into the trees, and was doing what I could, and then... He paused as if searching for words. And then? I prompted. Then I heard a few Russian enemy soldiers talking to each other. He stopped and looked around him suspiciously. Nodding, I waited a few seconds for him to continue. Vardik, what did they say? I snapped when my patience finally wore thin. One of the Russian astronauts is theirs, he whispered. They were talking in Russian and said one of our astronauts will try to sabotage the mission if the shuttle launches into space. The statement hit me in the chest like a fist, momentarily making me breathless. We have to stop the launch. No, we can't do that, he disagreed, looking around again. Outside, I heard the tank fire again and winced. What are we to do then? Just let them go into space with the saboteur? Give a warning to Chase, he urged, gripping my arms. He could be on the lookout for trouble. I wavered. It wasn't Chase who was going into space. If we don't launch now, we might not get another chance, Vardik said sternly. I swallowed, nodding. Thank you, Vardik. I won't forget this, I said as I turned and ran back to the bench where Dolores had laid out all her blueprints. Ripping a small piece of paper from a corner, I grabbed a pen and wrote 3 simple words. Traitor on shuttle. I looked above and saw the astronauts ready to board, Sharon amongst them. As I raced to stop them, my mind raced with options. Sharon's better at handling this anyway. Discreetly hand the warning note to Sharon. Hey, I called as I got closer. Plus we need to direct the battle and she's safer up there. I called as I got closer. Sharon turned and looked at me with a smile as I skidded to an absolute stop in front of her. I'm sorry, I looked at Sharon and smiled. I thought I'd come up and say good luck to all of you. I held out my hand to Sharon and she gave me a peculiar look, obviously confused by my behavior. Still, she grasped my hand to shake it, and I could see understanding on her face, obviously feeling a warning note between our palms. She gave an almost imperceptible nod, and I let out a small sigh of relief. I managed to pass on the warning. I just wish there was more I could do. I stepped back and shook my head almost imperceptibly at Sharon, making sure she understood that she had to keep the note a secret. We have to go now, Bean said, bodily grabbing Sharon by the shoulders and directing the team to the shuttle. I waved, unsure if we'd ever see her again. My heart squeezed in my chest. I'd found someone I'd happily live my life with, yet this could be the end. I love you, I said. Teacher, you're worried. Have we not done the right thing? I don't think anyone can answer that. I made my way back to the ground floor and directed people away from the area, which could be affected by the launch. The launch building was designed to protect the forward half, but there wasn't any harm in being overly cautious. Something moved in the corner of my eye and I saw Etienne stand up in Crank's sniper nest. "No!" I shouted, scared for the life of my friend. I looked away as Etienne fired the rocket launcher. When I turned back, he was laying on his back, immobile. My heart jumped into my throat as I started riding towards Crank's sniper nest. Just as the shuttle's rockets fired with a loud, deafening roar, the shuttle was finally launching. "Teacher, the shuttle is in danger." "We're all in danger, Moti," I yelled back over the rocket sounds. "The Russian army is directing a homing missile at the shuttle. It would destroy any chance we have." The fight wasn't over yet. Arc 14 completed. Only 13% of players stayed on Earth. Well, I suppose it's not very chivalrous putting Sharon into space. I tripped and fell, scraping my knee until they felt sticky with blood. Panting on the ground, I grasped for breath and saw, to my relief, Vadik leaning over Etienne, helping. I could think for a second. "Teacher, the missile. I love Etienne too, but this is more important than just one person." I wanted to snap at Moti, but I stopped myself. All these people trusted me. I had to act like the leader Dolores had asked me to be. "Moti, who's left around, and who can stop that missile?" "Many people are still fighting, teacher. There are not many that can assist, especially since we lost the Aetherite division." "What?" I asked, startled. "They're all dead, teacher. They sacrificed so much to make sure that we're successful. Only Mr. Wong and Mr. Teen remain alive." My head spun, but I tried to keep focus. Now wasn't the time to grieve. "Who do we have?" "I'm afraid there isn't anyone, teacher. Just us." We could pull Vadik off the task, however. I weighed the pros and cons. "I'll ask Vadik. He'll do it, I know he will." "Vadik," I yelled, getting back on my feet. He looked up at me. There was fear in his eyes. "They're about to launch a missile at the shuttle. Take them out if you can." His face turned stony and he nodded. However, he waited until I made it to his side before he spoke. "We have to leave this place," Vadik said to me. "The shuttle is launched. The mission complete. If we stay here, we'll all die." "I agree. Do you have a plan to get us out?" I muttered. "Has it all been worth it?" "Leave it to me," he nodded, clapping a hand on my shoulder and striding off with purpose. I knelt beside my injured friend and took their hand. "Etienne," I asked, hoping for a response. For a heartbreaking moment, there was no response. Then Etienne moaned and turned his head. He didn't open his eyes, but he was alive. That was enough for me. "Moti, get Wong over here. Etienne needs treatment." "Yes, teacher. I'm so happy Mr. Etienne's alright." "I'm not so sure that Etienne's alright, but he's breathing," I muttered, pushing his hair out of his eyes. Wong didn't come himself. He sent 2 men who were able enough to lift Etienne and take him back safely to the area where the injured were. I breathed a bit in ease then. I wasn't past redemption. Not yet. My phone bleeped then. It had been so long since I'd last heard it that for a moment I looked around confused. I slowly took it out of my pocket and saw the message. It was from Vadik. "Gear up. Our lift will be here ASAP. Start packing up the injured." "How do you think Mr. Vadik managed to find us a way out?" "Illegally, probably," I said. "I hope they're coming by air. I fear that might be the only way out." Fear is new to me, but I feel that way too. "At least yours is simulated fear." Moti didn't reply to that. I suddenly grabbed Wong's arm and leaned close to his ear. "Vadik's organised transport to get us out," I whispered. "I want the injured ready to go first. Can you handle that?" "Actually being useful?" he asked in mock disbelief. "Sure, I'm pretty sure I can handle that." "Thanks." I stepped away and raised the radio to call out. "Alright everyone, Vadik's pulled through and our getaway driver is on their way. Hold your positions. We're almost out the other side." The leaders of each group, or just those who had radios, replied to confirmation. I took a deep breath and rubbed my temple. "You don't seem happy, teacher. It's nearly done." "I can't relax yet, we're not done." A rumble shook the ground when I staggered on my way to the door to do my part with a weapon. I fumbled for a radio and yelled into it. "The hell was that? I thought the tank was blown up." Dolores answered, the background of the crackled transmission sounding deadly. I didn't even know where she was. "Vadik managed to redirect the missile. It's taken out a whole group of them. If we've got a getaway plan, I suggest we use it now." I breathed a sigh of relief. The shuttle was safe. Sharon was safe. We'd succeeded. "Someone's going to have to break the news to Sharon." Vadik gave his life to do it. My heart skipped a beat. We'd succeeded, but at a steep cost, it seemed. "Moti, get Wong moving. We leave first chance we get." "Yes, teacher." I'll also continue trying to contact the shuttle. I've not heard anything yet. I don't want to think about the possibility that we might not hear anything from them ever again. Also, I believe Mr. Vardik's getaway driver has arrived. I looked in the sky in confusion. How do you know? I don't see anyone. Trust me, teacher. You'll see them soon, don't worry. I waited, tense and flinching with each new explosion or gunshot. I didn't think there was much more my heart could take before it gave out. Dolores rushed in through the open front door, deftly avoiding bullets and returning fire at the same time. Turning, she saw me and shouted, "Call everyone in and get the cars loaded, we're busting through." I was confused, but knowing how every wasted second could affect the outcome, I called over the radio for everyone to retreat into the building. Dolores had already started moving people into place and carving out an area for our new friends. "What do you mean, get to the cars? Aren't we going by air?" I asked, moving to stand next to the door with her. Dolores gave me a look of glee, eyes twinkling. "Vardik's smarter than that," she said, nodding to the person on the other side of the barn doors. With a great heave, the person pushed open the barn doors, widening the area exposed in the building. "What are you doing?" I yelled, terrified. Before anyone could answer, there was a loud shriek of metal on metal, and our enemies outside screamed. 3 fire trucks, each one a giant metal tank on its own right, plowed through the careful lines that the company and Russian military had formed. I stared, mouth open in awe. How did Vardik even manage to do this? "I don't know, but bless him for it," Matron said, grabbing some of the gear beside me. "I don't know how we would have made it otherwise." "Right, let's get this done," I muttered, helping with the door. Dolores made sure there was enough room for the fire trucks to turn around as our buses pulled into the barn. As soon as they skidded to a stop, a few of us stayed by the door, taking potshots to keep the wolves at bay. A brutish man with thick, handlebar moustache came up to me, a bulky weapon in hand. "Stay back," he yelled, his British accent thicker than his facial hair. He pulled the trigger and a tongue of flame shot out the nozzle, setting the wooden barricades on fire and creating a curtain of fire between us and the advancing horde. "Time to go, chaps." "If you say so," I muttered, making sure everyone went ahead of me. I wasn't going to allow anyone to be left behind, not after everything we'd already been through. "What about the dead, teacher? We can't leave them behind." "We have to, Moti, to save the living." "Yes, teacher. I'm very sad, but I understand. We have to think about how we can save as many as we can." Aboard the fire truck at the front of the line, we all started pulling out. I looked back and made sure everyone was following us, with no stragglers left behind. "Get your head in the truck. Blimey, you're going to lose your noggin?" I pulled back into the cab of the truck and sunk into the seat as we drove straight through the fire, bracing myself for a collision. I turned to him. "Blimey, noggin? Are you trying to be a walking stereotype or just bored?" He laughed while I flinched as we hit the side of a tank. The fire truck tipped on its side, but within the space of a heartbeat we landed flat again. "Nah, my old pop's just a traditionalist," he explained. "You stick around a person long enough and you learn to talk the talk, so to speak." "Right," I said, unable to relax, even after we made it to the open road. "What teacher means is we are very grateful. Thank you for coming to rescue us." "Who's that?" he asked, looking at my radio. I held up my wrist with Moti on it by way of explanation. "Moti, radio back to the others. Make sure everyone got out." "Yes, right away." Then I eyed the driver of the large getaway truck. He wasn't wearing fireman gear, but blue overalls instead. "Moti's right, thank you. You saved us." He waved a hand at dismissal, checking the rear view to see if anyone was lagging behind. "It's a favour we need to pay, and Vardik would have honoured it if it was the other way around." I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. "This has all been so awful. You have a safe place to take us?" "Airport," he said abruptly. "There's a Hercules carrier fueled and ready to fly off with whoever needs to get out of the country." I looked at him again, this time with more curiosity. "How on earth did you arrange that? Who are you to even be able to do that?" He laughed, not taking the question too seriously, but with too much scorn. "Name's Philip Stamper. Friends call me Stamp. Once upon a time, I fled my own country and came here with little in my pocket but lint. Vardik made me a fortune out of the misfortune that I'd owed him, and I've owed him my life ever since. I don't know if that sounds more or less like the Vardik I know," I said, thinking about both sides of him, that had been trying to win Sharon back, and the other side, the one that ran headlong into battle to help others. "I'd like to see the old chap," the Brit said. "I was too preoccupied to find him with all the bullets and fire." I had to swallow a couple of times before I get the words out of my mouth. "He died," I croaked. "I asked him to take care of something and he died getting it done. He single-handedly saved the shuttle from a missile." Stamp didn't say anything for a moment. "I believe that of the damn fool." His voice was low, angry, and sad. I started relaxing. It seems that no one was following us. Maybe we were out of the woods. You still haven't told me how you've done this. He gave me a sly smile. It's been a long time since I was a reject with lint in my pocket, he said darkly. You don't need to know the particulars. Fair enough then, I muttered. Conversation seemed to dry up after that, though I knew that I should stay awake and keep an eye on my people. I couldn't manage it. The rumbling and bored whistling of stamps swayed me to sleep. Teacher? Teacher, wake up, please. Why does he always wake me up? Come on. I blinked in the harsh light. Why do I keep falling asleep? Have I got fucking narcolepsy? It was mid-afternoon and the sun was setting. The buses had emptied and Matron was organising the transfer of goods from vehicles to the cargo plane. Moti, have you heard from the shuttle yet? No, teacher, nothing. It doesn't mean that they're dead. That's only a percentage of the perceivable outcomes. Thanks, Moti, that actually makes me feel a lot better. The door opened and I nearly fell out of the truck. Wong laughed, catching my arm to steady me. Time to get to work, friend. We got places to be. I nodded and carefully climbed down, embracing Wong tightly when my feet hit the ground. I'm sorry, Wong, I whispered softly. The Aetherites are all gone. I never meant... I still have Satine, he said, stopping me. I kept thinking, why is it always me? Why am I always the one that survives? But it's clear now. I don't understand, I confessed, frowning. I'm taking the knowledge of hundreds of years and giving it to another group, he explained. His eyes glassy with both sadness and excitement. The children of Gaia and Aetherites have been feuding for so long. We need to join forces to make sure this never happens again. Sounds like you got your next step all figured out, I sighed, wishing I had a direction to go into. We'll see what happens, he shrugged, moving away. Teacher, the cargo plane is nearly ready to take us back home. Home? What a strange word. Yes, teacher. Our destination is America. I looked around at all our friends, some injured, others distraught. Let's go home. I'm glad we're returning to America, teacher. Constantly translating between languages is exhausting. I laughed. Moti's sense of humour had come a long way. Stamp made his way over to me and I waved. Hey Stamper, thanks for everything again. He was an oddity, like a sketch character brought to life. If I had to guess, I'd say he was head and shoulders shorter than me, but with zero body fat and built like a professional weightlifter. Just Stamp, if you please. Makes me feel like a rabbit from a cartoon when people call me Stamper. Sure, I answered, my mind seeing images of fawns and rabbits playing in animated flowers. I was talking to the other fellas and we've decided to come with you to America, he said without a preamble. I see. We just want to change the scenery, you know, he shrugged. I laughed. It has nothing to do with the horde you just busted through to get us, huh? Nothing at all, he said, a twinkle in his eye. Mr. Stamp, your words seem to be unrelated to reality. You're in great danger. It would seem wise to come with us to America. We both laughed, the relief of being so close to safety making us giddy. Moti, sarcasm. Learn it. Someone else in Stamp's group approached me and he turned away from me, giving me a moment to myself. Wong joined me, but didn't speak, sitting next to me in the grass. It was relaxing, and I would have slept again if not for the knowledge that we'd be moving again soon. Wong had an air of calmness about him that I sorely missed in these last months. It was strange to feel that here, close to the end, but it was welcome. He seemed settled, I said, fearing that the feeling would dissipate. I feel like there's nothing left to do but wait, he said honestly. For the shuttle, I asked. Or the end, he nodded, but I'm not sure what to call it now. Is it the sun? We don't know, but even if it comes, there's not much we can do about that now. So the lack of decisions to be made, I said slowly, trying to understand, makes you calm even though it could lead us to death. There's no longer anything I can do to avoid it, he shrugged, so why panic? It wasn't a bad philosophy to live by, but I struggled to think of it that way myself. There was a niggling inside of me, like I still had something to do. Someone called to Wong for help, and we both stood, helping the last of the preparations. Soon the cargo plane was ready to take off. Both us and Stamp and his friends had boarded the plane. Can we trust Stamp and his friends, teacher? We don't have a choice. Sure. Why not? I see, teacher. I still have no communication from the shuttle. I hope they're safe. Me too, I murmured, sitting on a box in the corner. The plane was crowded, filled with more people than I knew we still had. I was glad, however. It made me feel like we hadn't lost as much as I first assumed. Most people were sitting on the floor, or on boxes like me. I didn't know what were in the boxes, but I was glad they were here. The small comforts in life seem so important right now. Stamp made his way over to me and sat next to me, chewing on gum. How long since you've been home, he asked, making himself comfortable. Too long, I answered, closing my eyes. I wasn't really in a talking mood. Yeah? What was home like before you left? Still together mostly? He asked, ignoring my demeanour. I sighed and opened my eyes again to answer. Yeah, mostly. I left before the second sun outage incident, so mostly people were still filled with hope and optimism. He nodded, chewing silently for a moment. I thought about Russia and how governments around the world had collapsed. I guess I should have checked as soon as we were in the air, I admitted. What if we're jumping out of the lawless frying pan of Russia and into the fire of America? America has better stability than many places, teacher, though many of the states have seceded to form either their own countries. We can need passports, Stamp muttered, clearly displeased. I doubt it would matter at this point. I hope so, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. My lads look to me to take care of them, so I don't want to let them down. I looked around at all the people who come to help us in our time of peril. Many of these people aren't from America, I realised suddenly. Moti got them all to us, but now I'm not sure what they'll do. Actually, teacher, I've handled that. When I summoned everyone to Russia, I organised both Russian and American passports for everyone. Not physically, of course, but everyone's in the system. Stamp and I stared at Moti with surprise. Then again, I didn't know why I was surprised, considering all the things Moti had done recently. Everyone had passports, even if they weren't physically on the plane. It eased a weight from my shoulders. What about Stamp and his friends, Moti? I'll need everyone's full names and date of birth. Here, I said, unstrapping Moti from my wrist. Record everything you need, and bring Moti back to me. I won't forget this, trust me, he said, hurrying away. He was alone for no longer than a few moments before Umi ran over to me, climbing onto the box and settling into my lap. He's been asking to come and sleep next to you for the past few hours, Penny, his guardian said. She herself sat cross-legged on the floor in front of us. I didn't have Moti on me, I said. I knew Umi's fondness for my motorcon. His big eyes looked up at me. You need love too, he murmured quietly. Thanks, Umi, it's nice to know you're looking out for me. Umi said nothing else and just closed his eyes. Within minutes he was snoring. Sorry, Penny said, not seeming to actually be sorry. He doesn't really listen to anyone. Free spirit, you know. Not exactly what I'd call it, I muttered, but truthfully I wasn't bothered. Even though I napped many times that day, I settled back and closed my eyes to sleep. Soon enough we were back on American soil, and we had to work through the legality of sending everyone else home. Moti's pool of siphoned money from the company was insanely useful. We were able to afford private pilots to get people home. When all was said and done, it was the next day, and I thought about going back to my apartment, to my home. But I couldn't. Dolores slid up beside me and gave me a tired smile. You think they found anything up there? She asked, looking at the sky. Moti hasn't heard anything, I admitted, but I hope. There isn't anything else left to do. Suppose you'd be glad to get home. I have to see if there's anything left at my place. With that gunshot and broken window, it might actually be empty. I never asked, but how'd you get away when they came for you? I asked, curious. She gave me a wry smile, looking more like her old self. You have your secrets, I have mine, she said, laughing. Want a lift? I hesitated again, looking around. I don't know, It seems wrong, I said, cringing. I'm not sure why. It's not unusual for long cases, she admitted. Take a bath when you get home. I'm not sure that's it, but I can't stay here. Jump on the car, she said kindly. I'll take you home. I got out of the car and stood outside my apartment, staring at the windows. My neighbour's cat sat on top of the empty flower box outside my window and stared at me. It felt like it should be saying to me what I was thinking. What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. Mind your own business, cat, I muttered, climbing the stairs. I never liked that cat anyway. It only hung around that window because I used to feed it tuna. Maybe I didn't hate it that much. I got into my place and collapsed on the couch. A layer of dust flew up around me. I sneezed, which made my mood worse. The cat yowled on the window and I stood up with a huff, grabbing a can of tuna from my cupboard and emptied it onto the windowsill. I stroked the cat absent-mindedly as I stared into space. Teacher, may I have a cat? I looked down at Moti. They'd been quiet since setting up Stamp and his friends with passports, not even talking to Umi. What would you do with a cat, Moti? I asked, smiling slightly. I would love it, teacher, and it would keep you company when I'm gone. Gone? Where are you going? I feel that I won't be around much longer. With our work done, there isn't anything for me to do. What you do is look after me, Moti, I said, closing the window again. I turned back to the room and saw again how dusty and horrid it had become. With a spark of relief that I had a goal once more, I directed Moti to play my music playlist on the home speakers and fetch the cleaning materials from my bathroom. I didn't even hear the doorbell ring. It wasn't until Moti turned off the music that I even looked up from where I was cleaning the kitchen windows. Teacher, I assume you can't hear the door. It's very rude to leave someone waiting. Swearing, I darted to the door and opened it to find no one waiting for me but an envelope on my doorstep. The back of my neck started prickling. I brought the envelope back inside. What is it, teacher? The paper was generic, with a generic message printed on the front. Whoever had dropped it off had obviously dropped it off at the door and moved on to the next apartment. It read, "Science can't save you. Turn your life to religion before Judgment Day." "Junk mail, Moti," I muttered, dumping it in the trash bag. "Remember that lady who knocked on Sol's door when we were there once? I think she was ready to cry when the professor was done with her. Can we go to Professor Sol's house, teacher?" Well, I guess it's something to do. Sure. Yay. We should also check if any research is still there, teacher. That was more than a good enough reason. I left the house and headed for the bus stop. Not in any rush. It was 20 minutes of waiting before Moti piped up. "I just checked, teacher. Buses are no longer running. It seems that since most recent incident, they don't have enough workers." I let my head hang forward and laughed. Of course, the word had changed. I couldn't expect the transport system to be the same. "Taxi it is then. Find me one, Moti." It took 3 companies before someone answered and agreed to pick me up. From there it was only a short drive to Sol's, but I enjoyed the ride. In the back of the taxi, I could imagine that the last few months were simply a dream. But it didn't last. I paid the cabbie and ascended the small steps, leading myself into the house with a lockpick. Moti made no mention of it being illegal. We'd moved past that. The house was so obviously empty that a shiver ran through me. "I like it here, teacher. Can we move in?" "We already have an apartment, Moti." Moti didn't respond. I moved slowly through the house, looking here and there. Sol's place was a worse hit than mine. There were signs that squatters had been living here, but not anymore. All the cupboards had been ransacked, not that Sol had kept his house well stocked. I thought again about Dolores' place and made a mental note to drop by there as well on the way back. It was a small thing, but I wanted to make sure everything was okay. It had been so long ago since all this happened, yet here, I could close my eyes and imagine that no time had passed, if even for a moment. I stepped into Sol's study and paused. I glanced towards where I'd last seen Sol's body. Now all that was left was a dark stain on the floor. Moving across it, I crossed the room and sat at his desk. I leaned back in the chair, and once again saw the symbol of the Etherites and the Children of Gaia had been so excited about. It was painted on the ceiling. I wondered if Sol had sat like this, thinking about it. "I've been talking to Master Umi, teacher." "Didn't I say to ask me before calling someone?" I asked. "It was important, but the reason I bring it up now is that I think I know what Master Umi meant and how the symbol works." "I'm listening." "Master Umi was suicidal. He believed that his death would right all the wrongs of the universe. I think he was right." "Moti, how can you even say such a thing?" I snapped. I was horrified to think of a child believing that, let alone Moti encouraging it. "Not him, teacher. I was thinking about me." "You?" I asked, feeling loopy. Had I crossed into another reality? Had someone taken over my emoticon to mess with me? "The symbol says that there's a sacrifice. That's the square in the middle. I can do it, teacher. I'm willing and worthy. Professor Sol made me this way." "Moti? I can save many, teacher." "What do you mean Sol made you this way? You were made in a factory." "Moti isn't wrong." I turned to the disembodied voice, confused. Was someone else in the house? "Over here." I turned around again. Professor Sol stood behind me, a sad smile on his face. Stunned, I stumbled back, frightened. "How's this possible?" I gasped, rubbing my eyes. Was I hallucinating? Sol raised a hand and pointed to the window. "It's time, teacher." Like a curtain being drawn over the world, the light was rapidly swept from the sky, and within seconds, there was nothing but darkness. I stumbled to the window and looked out, a cold certainty settling in my soul. Umi's words rang in my head. The sun would not come back this time. This was it. "Those of us who can are taking shape all over the world," Sol said behind me. "We've tried to warn you, but now that you're here, we should talk." Steadying myself, I turned to look at Sol. There was an incorporeal look about it. His skin was slightly off colour and there was white noise around his form. That being said, He was becoming more and more solid as I stared at him in wonder. When he spoke, I didn't really hear his words, instead I felt them in my mind. I'm sorry, my friend, we're out of second chances. I don't understand, I muttered, moving around him carefully. Sol looked at me patiently and with a fair amount of amusement. He seemed solid. As if to prove me wrong, he ran his hand through his waist. Alas, I'm not. Fascinating, yeah? Yes, but that's not what I mean, I gasped, the wind gone from my lungs. No offense, but when you were alive, you were, crazy? Sol laughed. Yes, well, your perspective changes once you've crossed over. Crossed over where? Crossed over to here, he shrugged, offering no more explanation than that. It occurred to me that I should have been standing in complete darkness. I looked down at Moti, but the flashlight wasn't turned on. No, the light was coming from Sol himself. He was glowing. Moti does have a soul, he said, pointing to my wrist. You left Moti here once, and I was tinkering with the idea of creating a soul. I thought I failed. But you didn't, I muttered, too shell-shocked to argue with a phantom. I sunk back into Sol's desk chair and put my head in my hands. No, I did fail, he reasoned. I may have improved Moti's programming and electronics, but I did not make a soul. It was you, the teacher, who taught Moti all the things a person needs to know to become a sentient and empathetic soul. I've learned so much from you, teacher. Every choice you made taught me something new. When we tracked down the dead astronaut sister, you were kind to her, even though you were desperate for the truth. In Italy, you could have paid the mafia to save Sharon from the victorious cult, but you didn't. When a mob formed to attack a deaf and defeated golden-eyed woman, you told them to stop. When I was spreading the news about the son's final disappearance, you dismissed my work as inconsequential. When we were talking with Sharon on the jet, you said that moticon devices can dream if they want to. When Mr. Pierre was dying, you encouraged Mr. Etienne to grieve with his friend rather than returning to the battle, teaching me that some things are more important. When you found Mr. Petrus dying, you elected to stay with him until he passed away instead of going after his killer, showing that friendship was more important than revenge. And after Mr. Petrus died, I told you that I wanted to kill Miss Dagger for kidnapping me, and you didn't discourage me. You've taught me how to be a person, teacher. I stared open-mouthed. Moti, I'm only human. Sometimes I make mistakes. You can't take what I say as gospel. Moti's been watching you, my old friend, Sol said, a note of reproach in his voice. What kind of soul did you teach Moti to be? I was just trying to do the right thing. Sol shrugged before becoming distracted. Frowning, he looked behind him. Yes, I'll give him your message, he muttered. I'm sorry, are there other ghosts I can't see, I asked, a little alarmed. Honestly, there shouldn't be much that would surprise me at this point. Oh, not all of us have the resonance to become corporeal. He waved his hand toward the fireflies behind him. I have to speak for them. It's very good to see everyone again. Who? I asked again. Who is them? A large brutish man who worked for Dolores is here, he said, turning back. I don't know how he found me, but I assume it has something to do with you. Crank, I asked, throat dry. Crank's with you. Crank, I'm sorry, and thank you for saving Dolores. Actually, he's quite at peace here, Sol confided in me. He feels he's done his job, and this is his reward. But he's got a safety deposit box he wants you to claim. What? What's in it? He won't tell me. Don't worry, Moti's already taken down the details. Oh good, I muttered, succumbing to the temptation to cry. Sol was silent for a moment as I wiped the tears from my face. What, is there no one else here I got killed? I asked. All for nothing? I'm so sorry. That's what I'm trying to tell you, teacher. It doesn't have to be for nothing. With the right soul, the worthy soul, the balance will return, Sol explained. The earth needs to be comforted, and Moti can do that. I fingered the band of Moti's case and swallowed to clear my throat. What will you have to do? It was Sol who answered me. Moti will have to die. Like letting the battery run flat, I asked, swallowing uncertainly. That happens often enough. No, something more permanent. Sol shook his head. We have to remove the backup battery as well, so that Moti's special programming and memories are gone. This is stupid, I muttered, standing up. Moti's an AI, not a person. This isn't going to work. It will, teacher. I have faith. Faith is not based in logic, I muttered. Suddenly the situation was too much for me. I turned and dashed up the stairs and out the front door, barely stopping to close it behind me. And I ran blindly into the streets. It was becoming cold outside already, despite being summer, and it was eerily quiet. Everyone must have known that the sun wasn't coming back in our sky. If something didn't change, everything would be frozen and we'd all be dead. I stopped in a park where fairy lights filled the streets. From the bench, I could see a solar panel next to one of the trees, now useless in our world. Teacher, are you afraid? It's a stupid question. Of course I am. Afraid of losing me or afraid of being alone? Losing you, Moti. You've been the one constant in my life. Teacher, you don't have to be afraid. Seeing Professor Soul means the end is not nigh. Instead, we have new opportunities to help people. That is what moticons are made for. No, not you, I disagreed, moving to lie on the grass. Already the ground felt colder. You're special. I am. That's why it has to be me. I was silent. I had no rebuttal. How had all these months led me here, on a space shuttle trying to understand something so much bigger than myself? Though I suppose it had always been this way. Even way back when I had first taken the contract from the company, I took it because I felt like I could do some good. That was what Moti was feeling now, wanting her existence to mean something to the world. There was no sound in the night as I watched the fairy lights and fireflies twinkling together among the trees. It was as if the whole planet was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my choice. Moti, what will I have to do? Professor Soul is right. Disabling me beyond repair by removing my backup battery is the quickest way to wipe my special programming and memories. I can guide you through it. Alright, what's the first step? Let's just start, teacher. You can take it as slowly as you like. I took a deep breath and nodded. The clasp on the band practically looked new. The band itself looked worn. It had a kink where I usually threaded it. Release the backplate. Then you can see my inner workings. I swallowed and hesitated. I'm not sure how I can do this. I don't have a knife on me or anything. Stop stalling, teacher. There's a groove you can push your thumbnail into. Open the back of the casing. The small round metal disc came off with a popping sound. Moti was right. The little groove had been perfectly placed, so I just had to push a thumbnail into it. In the casing was a tiny circuit board and a bed of neatly placed small wires squashed into the minuscule space of the compartment. I could see the parts Moti Soul had tinkered with. Burn marks from a soldering iron, his trademark purple strip wires, the smaller secondary circuit board messily squeezed to the side. Soul's work, I murmured to Moti. Not that Moti didn't already know. Did it hurt when Soul was tinkering around in there? I don't have nerve endings. It would be impossible for me to feel physical pain even now. Sorry, I muttered, not sure I was apologizing or why my palms were sweating so much. Next, we'll need the multi-tool from your keys to move the wires out of the way and pry out the circuits. I could feel my keys in my pocket and the multi-tool attached to it. We're not going to lie to him, let's just do it. One by one, I separated the detachable tools from the multi-tool. I was biding my time more than anything. It's a very handy thing to have around, teacher. Why haven't we used it before? It's not really heavy duty enough for most things, Moti, I answered. I usually thought of it as a toy, a good luck charm that I wouldn't need. I don't feel so lucky right now. I took a moment to breathe and try to calm myself. Moti was just an AI, I tried to convince myself. Are you ready to proceed, teacher? What's next, I asked instead. You do not sound confident. Yes, well, you don't have hands, so you're stuck with me. Alright, teacher. Push the wires from the right to the left to prevent disabling me just yet. That way I can continue instructing you. Okay. Took a little bit of fiddling, but I was able to lift away most of the wires to reveal the rest of the circuit board underneath. Can you locate the quantum capacitor, teacher? It looks like a tiny black bug in it. I know what it looks like, Moti, I interrupted. I hadn't been the best in my electronics class, but I could identify something like that. Sorry, this is hard for me too. Clenching my jaw, I studied the little black dot that indeed looked like a bug. What do I do next, Moti? Moti said nothing for a moment. I actually turned the case around to see the screen. For a moment it was blank and then it lit up, Moti's face greeting me. You have to remove it. Without this component I can't regulate my voltages, and a vital part of my circuitry will fry. I will die. I sat for a moment not speaking, just listening to my own deafening heartbeat. What? I eventually said breathlessly. I thought you said we were removing a backup battery. I'm sorry, teacher. I was afraid you wouldn't agree to my sacrifice. My hardware must be thoroughly and permanently damaged. That's the only way. Alright, let's do it. I took a moment to prepare myself, then I slowly moved the tool towards Moti's quantum capacitor. Teacher, wait! I stopped less than an inch away from killing Moti. I turned the casing around and looked at Moti's face. I can't go through with it. I thought I could, but I can't. I don't want to die. I looked away, tears welling up in my eyes. I couldn't blame Moti. I was struggling to let go, but Moti had been so strong, pushing me to do the right thing. Now I had to be the strong one. Moti, I started, my voice cracking. You could save everyone. Not just a few people, but everyone. I know, but I'm afraid. You don't have to be, I murmured. You'll live on with me. I'll never forget you, Moti. I'll think of you every day. Moti was silent for a long time. Okay, I can do this. Teacher, I want to thank you. I am special and I'm worthy because of you and everything you've taught me. Thank you for making the decisions that helped me grow. The decisions that gave me a worthy soul. It took me a moment to clear my throat enough to speak. What you learned from me is nothing compared to the companionship you've given me, my friend. Then I flipped Moti over and pulled out the correct component. With a spark and a sizzle, it was done. I'm sorry. A police officer found me some time later as I sat in the grass with my head in my hands. Is everything alright? He asked, gently touching my shoulder. I looked up at her, forcing a smile as tears spilled from my eyes. Yeah, I think it will be now. I didn't have to wait for the officer to say anything. As soon as I looked up, I saw the sun shining above her head, bleaching the sky red with the coming of evening. Earth was home, where it ought to be once more. Yeah, I was surprised too, she said, looking up. I saw now that there were tear tracks on her face, just like mine. Do you think it might be over now? Yeah, it is, I said, knowing it to be true, all the way down to my bones. I doubt we'll ever know what happened, she shrugged. Sure do wish I knew what brought it back, though. Moti, I answered. Moti brought her back. The officer looked at me, joy and confusion in her eyes. What? A motorcop? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Several months later, when the doorbell rang on Christmas morning, I glanced out the window from my new home. The sun was shining a little too brightly. Having an American Christmas in summer just didn't feel right, but since the global upheaval, all the seasons had basically switched. Wong had already opened the door for me, having arrived first this morning. It seemed appropriate that on the first Christmas since everything, we were all meeting up again. Almost immediately after the sun had returned, I went to Sol's house to find his incorporeal form once again. I was ashamed that I'd run out on him like that. I should learn to treat the dead with more respect. In any case, I couldn't find him anywhere. He was gone. What about Sharon? Is she back? What happened in space? The absolute next thing on my list was to find Crank's safety deposit box. It hadn't been hard. With the instructions he'd left for me via Ghost Soul, I was able to head to the bank, say the right things, and bring the whole box back to my house with me. Inside were the details on Crank's family. I was surprised to see how extensive it was. There were photos and letters and instructions on what to do with him in the event of his death. There were also bank accounts and passwords. The instructions detailed how much each family member was to receive per month, and when the money dried up, who should be cut off first. I smiled, knowing that even after his funds were gone, I'd still find a way to take care of Crank's family. Umi joined me in the kitchen carrying a basket of fruits and cheeses. I smiled at the sight of the small boy. We'd become close since his guardian, Penny, had decided to settle in America. With Umi's enthusiastic agreement, I put down the knife I was using to carve the chicken and hugged him tightly before taking the basket from his hands. Did you help Penny put this together? I asked, putting it with the rest of the food. We dried the fruits ourselves, he confided Charlie. He was still very quiet for a boy his age, but we were confident he would come out of his shell when he was ready. Well, you did very well, it looks amazing. Umi blushed happily and shuffled his feet, Charlie looking out the window behind me. It wasn't until I was home that I realised the full extent of the damage done at the last stand in Russia. Wong had been the one to show me. He and Satine were the last remaining Etherites and had decided to join the Children of Gaia, who would welcome them with open arms. Aside from uniting two of the oldest secret organisations in the world, Wong had also been flying all over the world and rallying governments to pull their collective communities together. We've been in close contact. It was good for me to keep working, everyone had said. I'd gone through something traumatic, and keeping busy was the best thing I could do. Except the whole world had gone through something traumatic, not just me. Wong understood that, and in his calm and collected way, he immediately worked on making sure it never happened again. Together we were putting together a sort of press release, one that would survive the test of time. Everything we'd learned, why the sun went out and how to stop it, had become common knowledge in case it ever happened again. It was vital. I confided in Wong about literally seeing Sol's ghost and what we discussed. I was glad to hear something similar had happened to him. We were trying to figure out how to recreate the phenomenon. Wong theorized that all the souls in the other plane were actually manifestations of these imprints created by a physical body's resonance, So when the body was gone, these imprints or souls lingered on in the other place like an echo. It was hard to wrap my head around it. Wong, or more specifically his scientific mind, was doing better than I was. However, the biggest challenge so far was explaining it to other people. A voice called to me from the living room and I smiled down at Umi. Come on, let's join everyone else. The living room was already getting full, and I was glad my new house had a deck in the back. Wong met my eyes from across the room and nodded. We'd prepared a small speech for today, and he was ready when I was. I embraced Penny as she laughed at a joker from a Christmas cracker. Despite having a few fans in the room, I was wiping sweat from my brow. Having Christmas in summer was really abnormal, and I wish it would stop. Sharon caught my expression and started to laugh. Look, Sharon's alive. What a wimp, she cried, laughing. You know, summer in Australia is much worse than this mild heat you've got. Roads melt. I've had Christmases hotter than this since I was a young possum. Apparently the American opossum was something completely different to an Australian possum. She taught me that, along with many other things. I stuck my tongue out at her and she tried to grab it, falling into my arms instead. I kissed her soundly before she returned to her conversation. When she returned from space, the shuttle landed in Texas of all places. I'd been relieved. One of the Russian astronauts didn't return with Sharon, and I wondered if he was the traitor I'd warned Sharon about. They'd found Luca Parmigiano's empty spacesuit on the moon, but his body was nowhere to be found. They never did find the video recording they'd went to space for. However, for a moment, Sharon did experience the same thing Luca did. She watched the Earth disappear from the universe, along with billions of humans on it. Fortunately for her, she'd also witnessed the Earth's reappearance and barely managed to return to it. The experience had affected Sharon greatly, and she had refused to elaborate further when I asked her, but at her core, she was still the same brassy Australian I'd met all those months ago. Maybe one day she'd tell me more. She'd moved in with me since everything had returned to normal. I was relieved to find her safe and sound, and we'd taken it from there. We'd barely had time to be together without danger around every corner, so it'd been nice, the normalness of moving in together. Today she was antsy, constantly looking at the clock. Chrissy and her husband, Matthias, were due to arrive any minute now. I looked around trying to figure out who I hadn't greeted yet. Head out to the deck. I can't do that one. That's weird, why can't I do that one? Circle the lounge room. Just as I was about to move, a pair of hands clasped onto my shoulders. I turned around to see Dolores, already a bit red in the face from drinking. I hate Christmas, she announced without preamble. I raised an eyebrow. Why did you come if you hate Christmas? I asked, bemused. Dolores hadn't stayed still long enough for me to talk to her since the sun had come back. I wanted to see everyone, she admitted, to make sure it's real after all. I smiled, understanding. I sometimes feel the same. How have you been since everything? I asked, genuinely curious. She shrugged. The company's ignored me and I've ignored the company, she muttered under her breath. For the most part, at least. Dolores, what does that mean? I asked, almost immediately regretting the question. She gave me a sly look and didn't answer, disappearing into the crowd with a parting, "We'll talk." What about you? Chase appeared behind me, watching the crowd carefully. I hadn't even seen him come in. What about me? I asked, confused. How have you been, really? I'm good. Solid. He nodded and I eyed him carefully. He hadn't really been the same man I'd met on the plane, confident and cocky. For a while I'd thought it was just me, that maybe he blamed me for Farah's death. Then I'd seen him interact with Wong and I knew it wasn't just me. He looked like he was short a few good meals and many nights' sleep. Finally I got up the nerve to ask, "Are you okay, I asked. He gave me a bland look. He hesitated, looking around to see if anyone was listening. "We can go to the kitchen if you like," I offered, and he nodded, following me. When we were alone, he shrugged. "I feel like I was just a kid and now I'm not," he admitted, rubbing his face. "When Miss Farah brought me on board to join her operation, I thought I was clever and unstoppable. But that's changed," I noted, and he nodded. "I met Satine and she was so like me and," he said, scratching his head, "and then he fell in love with her." "Yeah, but then so many people died," he exhaled slowly. "I spent the whole battle wondering if she was one of the dead. But she wasn't, I empathized. She's okay, just like you are." "But that could change so quickly," he stressed. "And she could be snuffed out in a moment. Now I'm on edge and I don't know if I want to live like that." "Have you talked to her about it?" Chase said nothing and rubbed his arms distractedly. I waited, letting him think. "My advice, for what it's worth," I said finally, when it was clear that he wouldn't speak again. "You gotta live large. We've all been given the second chance to live our lives." "Living's what I'm worried about," he muttered. So stop worrying. He frowned, raising an eyebrow as if saying, easier than it sounds. You need to do something to get your heart beating and make you feel alive. I hesitated. It wasn't really any of my business, but it includes Satine in that life, if she lets you, I said. Don't let your fear get in the way of her life as well. Chase stared up at me like I'd grown several new heads. Without warning, he stood up straight, and his hands fisted. Okay, he said, not giving any indication of what that meant. With that explanation, he left the kitchen and strode quickly away. Wow, muttered a voice behind me. It seemed pretty heavy. I turned to see Etienne walking towards me, and I embraced him with a laugh. He'd been out getting party supplies, and I'd been wondering when he'd be back. You have no idea, I sighed in mock horror. Get everything okay? Yeah, more ice than we'll ever need. Speaking of, I've got to get it out of the car, he muttered, rolling his eyes and backing back out of the kitchen. He moved back to Flying Falls after everything had settled down. I missed him dearly, but I was happy he was happy. He'd gone back to being a park warden. When he'd arrived here a week ago, he was in full uniform, and we teased him mercilessly for it. His mother was arriving at some point today, but we didn't know when. He joked about her probably not coming, abandoning him again, but I knew he'd be hurt if she didn't show. Wong called from the living room. Everyone got a drink? It's time for a toast. Join Wong. I hurried out of the kitchen and headed over to where Wong was. Everyone fell silent and turned to face Wong, the laughter dying down. Well, it's not my party, but the host gave me free rein to make a toast, he stated, raising his glass. You can find the culprit later and administer a beatdown. Promise. There was a rumble of laughter and Wong smiled. First of all, Merry Christmas. It's great to see so many faces around the room that got us here. That kept the sun shining and the air spinning. Literally. I couldn't help myself glancing out the window to see the sun for myself once more. Whenever I woke up in the middle of the night, I panicked until I saw the time. It was a tough time, but we made it through alive, Wong said. Then his face became serious. However, there were too many of us that didn't make it. Wong looked at me and nodded. The others watched as I moved over to a pre-prepared table and picked up the lighter. As I touched each candle, I said a name. Professor Sol. I lit the candle. Miss Farah. I lit the candle. Petrus. I lit the candle. Vardic. I lit the candle. Crank, also known as Gilbert. I lit the candle. I noticed Amala had slipped inside as we lit the candles and gave her a tiny nod of acknowledgement. And on it went. Wong and I had tried our damnedest to remember everyone, and we had extra candles just in case. I hesitated over the last candle and took a deep breath. Moti, I said, my voice cracking. I lit the candle. We can't forget the sacrifices that have come before, Wong continued. We lived for them, and now it's on us to remember, not just our losses, but also why they happened. Wong started talking about the work that we'd been doing and the press release that we'd put together. It became too much for me. I yearned to step out onto the deck and get some air. Escaped to the deck. Casting a quick look around, I stepped out the open door and leaned against the wall at his side. It was noon and the unusual heat beat against my face, reminding me again and again that we made it. We were safe. It always took me a moment to remember that every morning, that I didn't have somewhere to be or any mystery to unravel, but still there was a weight on my shoulders that I couldn't shift. What choices could I have made differently to save more people? Who had died in vain? The choices had come down to me in the end, and I had to bear that responsibility for the rest of my life. A little hand took my wrist, and I looked down to see Umi's giant, childish eyes. I squatted down next to him and smiled. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, trying to smile. He pressed the emoticon he'd received as a gift some time ago into my palm, and closed my fingers over it. "I want you to have this," Umi said softly, a wisdom in his eyes that counted his young age. "No, this is yours, Umi," I laughed softly. "You have it." "I don't need it to talk to Moti anymore," he said, a simple and kind smile on his face. "But I think you do." I was too stunned to say anything before Umi walked back indoors. Looking down, I just stared at the emoticon in my hands. A round of laughter shook me out of my stupor and I stood to rejoin the party. Keep the gift. The rest of the party went well. Later that night, I collapsed into my bed, my head fuzzy from the drinks and conversations. I laughed at myself happily. A terrible thing had happened, but most of my friends were still here and alive and well. We spent much of the night sharing anecdotes of our lost companions. My head swam from one story to the next as I lay fully clothed on my bed. I'd only bothered to take off my shoes. The rest could wait. Stars danced above me as I fell easily into sleep. I stepped out of Sol's house and into the park next to it, trying to find something. I knew it was here. I just had to get it. Sharon and Etienne were just beyond the hedges, splashing in a water fountain. For a moment I was worried. Were they in danger? Was anybody in danger right now? But they were laughing and playing some strange game of patty cake, and I shrugged. Satine floated past a tree ahead of me. "Come on, you're gonna miss it," she called, her voice echoing strangely. With a burst of energy, I surged forward through another door. It led to a garden maze, winding around and around again. I knew that if I could find the center, I'd find what I was looking for. But I had to be fast. Someone was chasing me. Dagger. Dagger was laughing at me. As I tried to get to the center of the maze, I panicked, running faster. I was going in circles and then I heard a voice. "Teacher." "Moti, help me find you." Nobody answered my cries and I ran deeper and deeper into the maze until suddenly a large door made of the ocean hovered in front of me. If I was able to pass through it, I'd be safe. But Santiago loomed between me and the door and I was afraid. "Teacher, it's alright." Hope bloomed in my chest and I squared my shoulders. "I'm not afraid of you," I thought defiantly, staring at Victor directly in his eyes. And just like that, he vanished, and I was able to step through the ocean door. I felt like I was floating in an ocean, but I wasn't wet and there were no fish, just dancing lights. They flickered across me and I chuckled. It felt ticklish. A child strode up to me and played with the lights too. I couldn't tell if the child was a boy or a girl, but they were about Umi's age, and there was something so familiar about them. Together we leapt and captured the lights, holding them to our hearts and singing with joy. One by one the lights went out and I sighed, sad that my time here was ending. I turned to thank the child, but they were already walking away. "Wait," I called, stretching out my hand to the child. "I don't want it to end." "It never has to end, teacher," the child called back in a musical tone. "I'm so happy here." "Moti?" My bedroom was dark and my covers had fallen off my bed while I slept. My arm was outstretched into the air above me and I frowned. The dream had felt so real, I could practically still see the dancing light of happy souls surrounding me. As I dropped my hand, I looked again on the watch on my wrist. I never took it off, not even to charge it, after all. It didn't need electricity anymore. Moti's happy, laughing face was burned into the screen. The end. You and 28% of players saved Earth, and now work with Wong to make sure Moti's story is never forgotten. Also, you're with Sharon, and you've never been happier. The end. 28%. Game over. That's it. We done. Well, and there's not even any credits. Come on. Credits me. Here you go. Boom. Credits. So that's it. That's choices that matter and the sun went out. We're not going to go through it again. Obviously, I just went through it with the most honest answers I could pick. That is our ending. I hope you guys enjoyed the series. It was a lot longer than I expected it was going to be. It really, you get a lot of game for your $8 or whatever the game cost. Pretty impressive. I am curious to see how vastly different the endings can be, and if you guys have played through it yourselves and got a different ending, let me know in the comments what ending you got and how different it was, or how similar it was, because I'm curious. Till then, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next series.